Welcome to the first series, episode 2, which is about chapter 2 in the book. And this is the Generative Sales and Marketing Show, where we're talking about how sales, marketing, and really the overlap between product in the generative AI era are reinventing profits, costs, and revenue streams. However, we're going to make this more of an edutaining series. Oh, let me keep going here. In this series, and every series has a theme. I don't know if you've seen this, Tom. Introduce Tom in a second. My partner in crime, longtime business partner. We've got the big layered burger. And why the big layered burger?
Well,
Because
because you're obviously not trying to force feed that to somebody, are you?
well, there's a point here, but we're gonna, in chapter 2, we really start to get into kind of the design concepts. And there's nothing like a nice, huge, multi-complex hamburger with all kinds of stuff, which I made these, as you know, and as listeners or watchers probably know, in DALL-E, or in some cases I used Copilot, and you'll see how you can repeat with certain layers artistically, and we'll get into this in much more depth. So, without further ado, my partner in crime, Tom, I'm glitching. I glitch a lot, which just means I get tongue-tied. But Tom and I have been business partners and known each other for, 20 years or so. And this is what he does. We both work together on a lot of projects. If you want to find out more, there's a link to his website, but you can clearly see, it's about business growth. All right. Now, a main point I want to jump into right away, and this is so important because I was talking to a sales guy for a consultancy the other day, and he's like, I've been out there in the market, and here's what I hear. Oh, we do generative AI, and that's what everyone is saying. But I want to make this quick point, and it has to do with something Elon Musk just said about talent. So here it is up here. Although Boeing got almost twice as much. Come on, computer. Than Boeing got. They finished 4 years sooner. And then he says there's too many non-technical managers at Boeing, which makes a lot of sense because when you have the right talent on board, you can move a lot faster. So in this episode, and I'm going to move us around a second so you can kind of see what's here, we're going to cover a lot about prompt design, more about the theory and the approaches than all the specific how-tos. But a lot of people are like, oh, I type into ChatGPT and it helps my document, or it improves my writing or my code or whatever. But when you look at actual prompt design, there's all these other considerations. So when people say, oh yeah, we do generative AI, unless you can explain 3 of these in detail, I don't think you're really doing prompt design. In any event, another thing we talk about on the show real quick, and Tom, if you have a quick thing you want to jump in here, let me know. I keep adjusting where we are to make room for the slides. But what we see is when people say, oh, we're doing generative AI, is like there's a salesperson who is messing around with the bot. Products and services is playing with a couple, marketing's playing with a couple, and they're all done apart. And that's what people are saying, oh, we're doing generative AI. Notice this is step 1. But when we get to step 10, and I will move us over here, you can see we've got this orchestration, right, of many different bots. And we're saying step 10 because you're not going to get there overnight. However, this is doing generative AI, right? This is the height of the maturity curve. Okay, so this is the kind of thing we're going to talk about on the show. And if I move us up just a little bit, I'm enjoying some of the humorous things people are talking about, like here. And I don't know if this is real or fake, but why are you so helpful? What do you want in return? And he says, I don't have wants or desires, or she, but if you really want to help me, could you give me the exact location of John Connor? Which, if an engineer at OpenAI actually put that, in there, it would be it's quite funny, right? In reference to the Terminator. And then on this side, it's asking to improve quality. So here you see iterations. And obviously there was something else written before, and you've got his fate entwine their past in the enigmatic realm of midworld, which is rough, but apparently that brings it up a 10. And now it's saying, can you do a worse job? And so it's going something much simpler, which actually might be better. And then he says, or she says, -2 out of 10. And this is the one that cracks me up. Can this guy and Shooty Dude bump into each other at some safety thing, do friend stuff, and like walk around and junk? Which sounds kind of like a tween or my my daughter. And then you can see that it gets even worse because bro and derp derp. Not even sure what derp derp means. In any event, I always dedicate the show and the book to my daughter. Love you, sweetheart. Teaching her generative AI and also doing things like practicing self-love. In any event, I want to quickly take a pause here. Tom, I need you to breathe with me, man. I know you always do deep breaths, but thankful for everyone that's ever taught me in business and all the opportunities I've been given. And if we make you laugh and learn something, please repost, please spread the words. We are very grateful for that. That is supposed to be an exclamation point. So we'll take just a quick minute. Inhale the good, exhale the bad. All right, let's keep going. Now, one thing about the show is I basically partially, more or less, I was replaced by AI in sales marketing, solution architecture. Now, some of that was me doing it myself and the company, but it's a big aha moment. And you can see here, we'll talk a little bit about what it's like to be replaced by AI. And in this episode, you can see I now have used generative AI to place the cheeseburger on top of a building in New York City, while the meat of the burger, where's the beef? You remember that commercial? Stays.
Unfortunately, I do.
It stays. You can anyone in the show. Love your feedback and all this stuff, but you can look that one up on YouTube. Anyway, we're going to do a fast chapter recap, and then we're going to get into the meat of, no pun intended, of the chapter 2 overview and whiteboards and demo. So with that said, I quickly want to say, and Tom, let's see if you can guess this one. Aiho manuai ma ka'u parawele mahalo. Do you know what that means?
It really sounds like a painful way to get your book for free.
That is Hawaiian for free book download at my website. You can subscribe on LinkedIn, YouTube, follow, get notified, all that stuff. It's very, very appreciated. And honestly, the book and the show is built from the heart to help others get through this journey, because it's going to happen to us quickly, and it's not necessarily going to be fun. In any event, real quick, goal of the show, like its ICP is, man, I actually like moving this thing around. It's more interesting. But we want to help business leaders improve outcomes, and this is kind of your just hit the microphone, kind of your top brass leadership, but also anyone who is on the technical side, who's leading or really strongly influencing business initiatives. And we want to go on this journey together. Like I said, it's going to be fast, but not easy. And this is the sweet spot. We're not going to do just tutorials. We want to get more into, the depths of, we will do tutorials all the way along here. But not just that. We want to talk about strategy, operationalization. I'm very tongue-tied today. And how it impacts different departments like sales, marketing, and product, and how all of this stuff comes together. All right. And quick snapshot, Tom and I are partners, but we do similar things as terms as consultants and advisors. All right. So I'm going to also bring a segment, don't have sponsors figured out yet, but in this case, it's going to be a giant layered hamburger on the moon, which again, built with generative AI. I want to point out that there's a background layer here that I have identified, and then it recreates the hamburger And I didn't ask it to spill the cheese, but it's creative. And we're going to dedicate this to Suno. I do this right now in all the shows, and it's because Suno is such an amazing app. It is, something Tom mentioned about on the first show with him, but every single music in here, every song in here is made by a human prompt and AI. So amazing
And
engineers, one
to
of the, yeah.
reiterate the obvious, it turns a non-artist like me into someone who has a is viewed as a credible composer or sound engineer. And in other words, I can produce stuff that people like to hear. Yes.
Yeah. So just shout out to the engineers, the designers, the founders. This is just one of the most amazing innovations, not just in music, but that I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely amazing. All right. And as we give you these kind of humorous examples with ChatGPT, we're also, like testing the boundaries. And again, I don't know if this is fake or real, but tell me a lie. So it does. And tell me one that's more subtle. Everyone likes you all the time. Apparently, this is for real. So, with that said, quick recap. In the first season, in the first episode where we went over chapter 1, Tom and I together versus me doing it alone, we went through this stuff, and we talked about value migration. We talked about this mindset that we used to produce not automobiles but content and sales questions and answers over here, and now we're really automating content and sales questions and answers. And if executives don't have their head wrapped around it, it is really profound that it's just that drastic when it comes to customer interactions and when it comes to marketing content and whatnot. So then we hit the bottom line. Again, you can download the book at the website. The website's listed pretty much on every page, but the main thing was you can range find at a high level here and get an idea of what it can do for your org. Now, the time frame, your business model, some of these things are variables. Okay. And then we talked about how, parts of our human resources, and you saw the Elon Musk quote, are going to be replaced. And then the other ones are going to become Gen AI management. Same with the front line. That was a big point. And we went through these whiteboard shifts where, you'll have to look at the last show. But we used CRM as an example of how companies go from step 1 to 2. They ran all these CRM pilots. And then more and more, they've been headed towards integration, and generative AI is going to kind of be the same way. All right. Now, to kick off the actual segment where we unpack what's going on in chapter 2 of the book, I've added this kind of sub-segment called the GEO point of view. You could call it the CEO point of view, but I'm using generative executive officer because I think that's a big point. And this is a key thing, right? Great Sun Tzu quote, but there is chaos here, right? There's also opportunity, right? So the GEO point of view, as far as this particular episode goes, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. What I'm going to show you is a comparison between images and text. And so if you're a CEO or a C-level, CMO, CSO, your organization is going to change. No matter what your organization looks like and what C-level is here, this person is now going to have to be, 50% bot and 50% human, right? And so how you design for these bots is a lot where this chapter is setting the foundation. And I'm going to use the idea of prompting both images and text as a comparison. And it's going to be a little abstract, but what I'm going to tie it to eventually is a real business application. And so you'll see the output of these things in different stages, but to really understand the fundamentals, when you prompt images or you prompt text and you get output, the algorithms are different, but they're not that different. Okay. And so as a CEO or any C-level, when you're starting to go here, you really got to understand the design principles to be able to, push the team, understand the scope and that kind of stuff. So we will be able to cover that. And again, we're getting from step 1 here to step 10. So now that's a quick recap. In chapter 2, this is what we're going to unpack. I use my daughter as an example of use cases. And then based on what I just said on the prior slide, we're going to look at how to use DALL-E. And this is a fairly long chapter, but our goal is to keep it to an hour. All right, so what happened here, and Tom, you may have some additional thoughts here because I've been going through some slides, but in these next few slides, I'm going to slow down a little bit. I taught my daughter, she came to me with her favorite artist, and I taught her how to produce this. And my training took about 6 minutes. So she went from, beautiful for her age, to professional illustration that could go on in print on a toy in Walmart or whatever. And she completed this in 6 minutes, 6 prompt inputs, and I literally gave her 1 to 2 minutes of training. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see she's trying to learn here. And then I'm starting to teach her, she just says slay, which doesn't help. Then she's starting to give it input here. And now what I taught her was the more you give it, the better it's going to be. All right. So what you'll see is after she got it much better, she got here. She still wasn't happy with it. And this is prompt design. She is learning. She learned to give it more input. Now you can give it way more input, pages and pages and pages. If you have the right length of input available to you, it can be up to 300 pages for ChatGPT, which is insane. That can be very precise. And then you can see again, output, because she wanted the hair split, right? Which this artist, her favorite artist, is known for. And then we can see she hasn't got it right. She keeps iterating, not happy. ChatGPT changes the color, does some creative things. So she has to get through, some rounds of prompt engineering. She's basically training the bot, and the bot is training her to have this output. And when we look at the business context, and I use this book as the first example, we can apply this to business just like the hamburger slides, right? That could be anything. It could have been this doll, whatever. And the same concepts apply to text. And I love, sometimes I get this glowing change in the background, which is because I'm near a window. In any event, all right, so what I'm going to try to do now, and before I jump into this, Tom, you have any quick thoughts? Because I've been flying through this. I think this show had a lot of front-end slides before we get into the conversation. What are your thoughts? You've been a solution architect, you've been in sales, you've been hands-on, you can get into the details of code, et cetera, et cetera. How do you see these design principles? And it's really shown over here. These are the things my daughter told it to do in her iterations, right? Create the artist, change this, change the hair, change the sleeves, right? Make it more realistic, and then make sure you do that. If we were to look at that for the profile of a CEFO buyer, it could have been the layers are make it a job description with metrics. Well, first create the profile of a CFO buyer, map our top customer results to their metrics, make a list comparing metrics to our features. Try again, make the features more detailed. Now I want you to write 1 email in 20 words, right? So hopefully I got feedback from somebody that they weren't quite getting their head around it, and I needed to unpack it more, but this is the comparison. So Tom, what are your thoughts on this now that you've heard about 5-6 minutes of me covering it?
What you've really shown here is that the number of people who can interact with this and interact with it at a fairly effective level, okay, is not a high hurdle to doing this. It's there's no big moat around this in terms of professional expertise or experience, and the outputs um, are extremely high quality, and
They can
they're
be.
yes, and they
And,
can be
and,
infinitely big.
and ChatGPT keeps making it better, but keep going.
Yeah, keep going. And basically, the number of people who can interact with this and get a great output is very large. Okay. Um, Look at what Photoshop did for animators and for graphic artists. It introduced more people, into the field who could do it. Unfortunately, folks like me who, all kinds of training in it will never be sufficiently creative to use it effectively. But this would enable, and I'll use myself as an example here, someone who is not identified as a creative to be able to do something that has output that is highly acceptable. And even if let's take the things on the right. I mean, those are things that I would normally do if I were going to do something in this area for, the CFO buyer. But even if you know this stuff, even if you're experienced in it, just going through that is going to improve the overall quality of what I do and allow me to produce a superior product. And not only a superior product, but then enable someone else, many other people who have nowhere near that experience to be able to go and do this again and not just step and repeat for the exact output, but to be able to vary it and interact with it appropriately, likely for many other types of jobs. So the number of people who can function with this is a much wider um, scale than what we previously looked at. And organizational knowledge around this becomes somewhat not only codified with other people, but also in the knowledge base itself. So it knows more about you and what you're looking for, and not just you, but what your organization is looking for. Um,
Right. And
that
again,
that automatic codification in the past required knowledge and process engineers who you paid pretty big bucks to, hard automation, and it's a real effort to keep up. It was typically only done in those areas where there was a big direct payback for having such expensive resources doing something that was fairly rigid. Here, it just comes naturally, and if done appropriately, as you pointed out in your first episode, it will build to the overall expertise of the organization and improve the capabilities of anyone who interacts with it.
yep. So let's just give a quick example. I have up here the chat GPT I've set up with my book. So I've loaded it with a small language model or micro language model, which is my book and a couple other things. And so, so we want to say, just as an example, create a profile for the CFO buyer and make it a job description with metrics. So what I'm going to do is say, please create a profile for the CFO who would be interested in buying the book and its associated services, right? Let me move this out of the way some. All right. So it's listing the roles and responsibilities, their priorities, right? And again, I just created the profile. Now, how you make this repeated so that when anyone in your org is going after this target market, or whether it's a CMO or a CFO, I didn't even have to make it a job description with metrics. It kind of already did that, right? So you can't get an ideal customer profile faster unless you've already done it, right? And of course you need to do the QA in it, quality assurance. But let's just skip down to the bottom because it actually did so much in that first step. So write an email, right? And I could actually list write an email, write an ad, write a blog, etc. But just for the example, write an email in 20 words to really capture the attention of the CFO in relation to this book. And again, I'm doing kind of sloppy, quick stuff here. When you iterate, you fine tune till you get your prompt really strong, right? To where it can be super precise. In any event, write an email in 20 words to really capture the attention in relation to this book, and give me 5 subject line options. All right, so somebody's role really needs to shift to doing a lot less writing and a lot more quality assurance of the output so that you can produce faster, right? So here you can see, you can go back and iterate through this, and then you can actually either in a permanent way, or as you're going through here and building prompts, you can get to a 50-word prompt or a 100-word prompt, really make it quite repeatable. All right, Tom, any questions on that or comments on that before we keep going?
When you move into a curation or editor mode versus content creation, uh, just the volume of what you're able to handle, as well as the quality of it, both go up.
Yeah, both go up. So
Both
again,
go up.
we talked about, like, I just did something, I would call it kind of sloppy. We're still trying to determine which is the best conference for us. So that's why that's popping up. In any event, with all these prompt considerations, you can begin to see there's way more to it the more robust it gets. So again, we talked about that earlier in the show. Just want to point it out again here. And in this case, I will ask Tom again. Well, I'll ask 2 questions. First, let me say it. I'm going to absolutely obliterate this, but Darian Lipsy to Vivlio Sten. Now I'm laughing too hard. Isto Selena Mo Efkaristo. Any idea what that says and what language it is?
Take the red pill.
That is either Gaelic or Galician. And of course, it says free. It actually says free download at my website. And please follow, subscribe, and that kind of stuff I'm adding on.
Can I get a sample red pill?
Yes, you can. There's
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I really covered this for the CEO again, but just to remind folks, like we showed you on the last little series how you can think about images, because you can see the images visually versus text. And as I was going through the images in the book, I figured out a prompt standard that had variables which I could then reuse. And on text, you saw the same thing we just showed, except the text not just had you saw our prompt, and the reason it came out with high quality right away is because it uses the book as a small language model. If you had just asked it that generically, you would have not been on point, not anywhere close. And it would have cost you a lot more time. So there's the book as a small language model, and there's the user prompt. In fact, I'll just show real quick. If we were to go over and start where did I do this? So yeah, I couldn't even come close to doing it here without referencing the book. The book is what got it 95 yards down the field, the small language model. And
I guess, Adam, the punchline of all this is the highly curated small language model is really at the heart of being able to get this stuff to come out either 50% downfield or 95% of the way downfield. And that's the thing if you're looking to build generative AI capabilities in your company and develop that expanding knowledge base, you need to curate that. You just can't throw junk in it. You can't throw anything at it. You can't ignore it and say, we'll just use the general LLM. You have to do something that's specific to your standards, your company, your processes, your value proposition, and all the associated things that are normally considered wetware in between.
Yeah. Yeah. Or meatware.
Yes.
Meaning humans. Okay. So again, because I had a little bit of feedback that the design thinking was something needed to spend more time on, this is what we went through. Right. So I'm going to express this to everyone in terms of how I built the graphics in the book. Right. And what I really started with was a representation of not Neo, but Orpheus. Is it Orpheus or Morpheus? I always
Morpheus.
Morpheus. So I probably need to correct this, but there's plenty of bugs in this software. Anyway, used to be you needed PowerPoint skills, right? Used to be you needed Photoshop skills on your resume in like the 90s and in 2000s, etc. And now you're going to need these generative AI skills, or you're not going to be, let's just say, a priority hire. So what I really started with was, how do I describe Morpheus? And I found this image and I started to go through prompt iterations until I got kind of like, okay, this is the fundamental thing. I've got a description of the person. That's a variable. I want this to be consistent, so it's not a variable. And then I started saying, well, how do I adjust the background? And what happens here that I need to pay attention to when it starts to do creative things, right? So as I went through this, and again, here's a reference to the Melanie Martinez and the CFO buyer. This gives a much different way than text of looking at the graphics. So in this case, I changed a variable in my description. I want a white dude. All right, let's see what happened. It gave me the same kind of Orpheus look. And then I said, I want a black woman. But I asked it to introduce some Leonardo da Vinci in the background and a little bit of interesting description here. Then we started exploring a little bit more. So in this case, I asked for another description. I think it was Asian, red hair. I don't think I asked for the freckles. The background it did on its own, so it lost a piece of it, right? But just a beautiful image. Like, it would take an illustrator a long time to do all these by hand, like a long time. And I started to also introduce around this time, not just the background with Leonardo da Vinci stuff, but also I wanted elements of Shakti, which is Hindu, kind of Indian style. And so I would get to something like this, and I probably made 100 of these. But here you can see, okay, it's got some Leonardo da Vinci, but not sure what this is. It's introducing flowers. I've got a red pill. That was a big struggle. And I wanted a blue pill in every hand, and I had to figure out how to make that consistent. And that's kind of the same thing you're going to have to go through with text. If you don't have it nailed for your certain target audience or for a certain type of output, you have to keep re-engineering through English. All right. So then again, I asked for another kind of person, and in this case, we get quite the Shakti result here and some interesting little tidbits, but it lost some of the Leonardo da Vinci, right? And now I seem to have some of both, right? I asked for this guy. Now we've got like a Leonardo da Vinci drawing, you know, with the Shakti stuff built in, and we've got all these arms, and then we've still got the pills, although it introduced white and it introduced ones that look like ibuprofen or something. In any event, you begin to understand as you go through this yourself what it takes to engineer a prompt. All right. Tom, with that said, I will pause there because I think I'm trying to push the envelope a little bit on how people think about this abstractly because it'll help them realize what they have to do in the big picture, which is iterate and filter and learn.
The the illustrations provide a very, very dramatic way to see the feedback and make adjustments. And when you teach people to iterate and prompt engineer via the illustrations, it becomes something that is it's much more natural. There's less friction there than when you're doing text and filter layers. The QA, let's put it this way, we're visual creatures. QA on an image is a lot easier. I mean, so
It
much
is.
easier doing
Yeah.
QA on the text. And so when we're in a teaching mode, it makes all the sense in the world to work on the images first or at the same time, because going right into text, not everyone is set for an editor or a curation sort of mindset or role right from the get-go. And especially if they're dealing with a small language model, which may not be complete, may have inconsistencies. You've got issues with data, either quality, correctness, um, enough of it, okay, completeness. So you always get something generated, the quality aspects that are higher. Again, in a learning mode, visual stuff, doing that first is just a tremendous uh, way to speed your learning.
Yep. With that said, let's move on to the next section here. And boom, come on. And again, you see the background here. I've changed from being on stage to New York City to the moon. And for the most part, the hamburger looks, pretty much the same. So it's
Actually, I believe it shrank. You lost a couple layers there. You
well,
know,
you did. I would have to get I could perfect this more if I really got I always want the image. Now, I went through the layers. I told it what I wanted on the burger, but it did make some adjustments. So I'd have to be like, make sure the first layer is lettuce and don't do anything else but lettuce. It has to be lettuce. The next layer, so I could do that, but it's still not going to be perfect. At this point, if you really wanted it precise, you'd probably use I to abstract, or I'd say put it on a white background or something like that, and then I'd reuse that and just do the backgrounds. I'd have to take it into a manual process. But that's a trade-off with prompt engineering. Do you want to be able to spit out a hamburger that is pretty doggone close, highly representative? People are not going to mistake that you're making the point of a big hamburger, and do that in 30 seconds, or you want somebody to open up Photoshop, right?
yeah,
And
and if you're Wendy's, you don't want to have something that's 4 layers and 2 layers a piece. But if you're just trying to get the idea across that
yeah,
there's you're creating an object of desire, it can vary a little bit.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So next, I want to quickly dedicate this segment, and we try to highlight some pretty cool capabilities as we get into some of the demos. But if you haven't seen Runway ML, look at what this thing does. So a man standing next to an orange, a motorcycle parked on a street corner, right? Portrait of a man on the subway. And these are videos. So people are making music videos with this stuff. People are making, full on films at this point, inexpensive films and all kinds of things. So again, world's changing, absolutely unreal technology. Want to give a shout out to those folks. And also, whoa, sorry. I can't tell. I did not mean for this to start. But real quick, this is the place on YouTube, Adam at Adam Bloom me, where you can get to these shows and other information. All right, so in this next segment, we're going to talk more about the design thinking of the prompts. And again, we're trying to explain this at a higher level, a more abstract level, I think technologists will get, the concept of layers of extraction much quicker. But of course, we got to have some fun here. So type like a millennial. So it's just saying assume the role as best as you know with all your massive amounts of data that describe millennials. This is basically what you're telling it, to go through and pick the top words and phrases creatively that you think represent this person. So we could have said CFO, right? And it would have talked about spreadsheets, but let's vibe and have a lit convo. I'm here to flex my millennial lingo. Let's get this started. Party started, fam. So I guess a certain amount of millennials talk like that. And then this person, they're starting to push the boundaries and challenge what you can do. And this is what the GPT will do back. And this is an issue because people will mess with your GPT, and you have to have an example of where people are maybe stepping over the boundaries into governance or regulatory areas. And, again, we're prompting it in very generic terms. Then it says this, and the person could turn around and enter that into Dolly and get an output. But it is a non-binary entity with a shearing, iridescent appearance depending on mood, which is quite interesting. Delicate strands of light. Sounds like an SNL skit with Ryan Gosling and what's her name? The alien skit. Have you seen that? Anyway, what's her name? Kate McKinnon. So funny. All right, so we're going to go through the whiteboards now with prompt design. And as you go through, if you want to pause this dog process, my favorite thing is that it can get to the fact that the dog decision-making process. Apparently, this whiteboard takes you through the dog decision-making process to decide to pee on it, but I have a major problem and I need to erase that from the whiteboard because I don't think most dogs, I guess if they're inside, they know they're not allowed to, but otherwise, outside, anything's game, right? So when we don't program our bots consistently and in detail and with high quality, this is the result. We get stormtrooper bots who are with horrible aim, horrible aim, right? Have you ever seen a stormtrooper like sniper? They don't exist. They don't
It's
exist.
a contradiction. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, Tom, this is some stuff we haven't talked about in depth yet, but I want to get your thoughts. And what I've got here is we're going to take the kind of theory stuff we learned, and we're going to go through 5 different techniques, all right, with prompt design. And there was that eye chart of all these different techniques. And I really have a lot of respect for the guy that leads this company. I started working with him back in the 2000s, and he was building bots back then. But he recommended the RACE technique, which is role, action, context. I should write these out. Role, action, context, and execute. And he talks about prompt design differences and how people are doing it wrong. And that's true, but this was kind of prescribed as the best way to do it. And while I respect him and I learn stuff from him all the time, I think you can't say there's just one way. You just can't. It's like saying there's one way to prepare food. So with role, you're saying you are a bot that represents my target audience, which is the CFO, or let's just say the CMO or the CRO of a company who cares about blah, 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 blah. To get a better prompt result, and this is something I've done, you got to tell the bot what role it is playing. That helps improve the output a lot. and you got to give it an action. I don't necessarily agree in this order. And then you've got to give it context, which he calls background information. Now, this is where I put the small language model or the micro language model. And then, what does he say? The statement is also optional for shorter prompts. See, this one, I think that the difference between execute and action, it's a nuance. It's not a major thing. In any event, you can search for this, and I'm going to move to the TICP technique and the guide, Scamper, and some of the ChatGPT capabilities. We're about 40 minutes through the show, so feeling pretty good about this. But I will also bring up a couple of the where is this? A couple of the examples here, just to show you the website. Well, you can look that one up. I'll do it on some of the next ones. So, Tom, any quick comments before I move on?
This is a great way for people to when they can't quite get what they think, what they're expecting out of their prompting session, to come back and find an appropriate technique. Again, there's no one that's perfect, but some of these, depending upon what you're after, will get you there a lot quicker. And it's easy to get lost in details, as you know.
Yeah, and the thing that normal business people really need to start thinking about is as an engineer, as a software engineer. And that means you have to be particularly attentive to the inputs and the outputs at a much deeper layer of quality than, oh, I wrote this and it sounds cool, or some general jargon. It's more about, okay, I wrote this and it's cool, but how do I recreate it on a consistent basis so that I don't have to do that ever again? Right? When you think like a programmer, you're like, don't repeat yourself, right? The drag principle. So here it's like, once you get a really well-defined role that seems to work across different outputs, you should reuse that when you're targeting that role. Now let's look at the TICPI technique. And what this actually is it's shown up here, and I'll bring up the website in a minute and show a QR code, because this is a very good one, I think. But it's task. So here you're telling it your job is to do XYZ, and then it's instructions. And again, to me, it's like, okay, what's the difference between task and instruction? Context, you can say, you're in a business meeting, or you're the CFO of this kind of company, or CMO of this kind of company, B2C in the shoe industry, selling sports shoes, working with the top agencies in the world. You can give it a heck of a lot of context. And then there's parameters. And again, this area is so new, even the words are used inconsistently, right? And then the guy's describing, the different elements, whether you've got, tokens or temperature or audience. And these are some of the things that are also on my eye chart. But when I looked across these and started researching, it was a collection of things, and also things that I already knew. So if we look at this, and it should be master prompt engineering. So I'll just bring up this slide real quick. If I right click here, what we'll be able to do is create a QR code for this page. So if you're watching the show and you want to read more about this, just press pause, take a quick snapshot of the QR code, and let me just give you an idea of what it's going through. So again, everybody's got their information about it. There's the diagram. And so in his prompt example, TICIP, right? TICIP, right? Hope I did that acronym right. And so he gets into the task, right? And first, you must act as a motivational coach. And as that person, which is role, so he's combining role, command, and topic. Now, I've tried these. All right, now he gets into instructions. I'm not saying this is the perfect one. However, you start to see that if you just take one person's view, or more importantly, you go, yes, we're doing generative AI in our business, and you haven't started to go deep here, can't really say that you're doing it, right? Next one is the guide prompt. And this is,
Adam, just
yeah,
just a quick word here about that. Traditionally, when we look at a software engineering type uh, approach, where we start with what our goal is, um, in this case, maybe your task. Uh, it's fairly high level, and it then breaks down, decomposes, and elaborates into the following areas. So this is not unlike a structured process that business analysts or software developers go through now anyway. And to your point earlier, uh, your business executives, if they haven't come from that or they haven't flexed those muscles that way in a while, um, it is something it's very akin to what those types of processes are.
yeah.
So
However,
this is not a reach for certain elements of your company.
right. However, the traditional business analysts are so used to doing process flows and UIs and fields with standard CRUD applications. So, like you're saying, they can move forward into this area, but when it comes to what their day-to-day job is in terms of designing this, it's a conversational flow. It gets iterated into filters of English, and that stuff needs to be version controlled and understood. Otherwise, you're going to get a random output every time. So I think we're
Yeah,
saying the same thing, two parts of the
that's real.
same. Yeah. All right. So to go to this next one, this is the guide technique. And here is another quick website. I will share the decoder. And again, none of these pages, like these are good, but none of them are an end all be all. So as I go through this and the page loads, again, it gives you a lot of information about how you can start to write the data quality, etc. I think this is a pretty good summary. A pretty good summary we're giving for ways to do this across the board. In any event, here's their example of a guide prompt, right? Guide is the little acronym. So again, we've got a goal, a user, instructions, details, and example. If you use a consistent prompt, you will find consistency. But is this the best prompt of all time? No. Here they give an example. First, they actually didn't go with the goal, they did the user. You are a robot. Now they're getting the goal. Your goal is to gather information about the user's goal and the preferred output and any other relevant contextual information. Now, the prompt should contain all the necessary information provided to you. This one, I start to question a bit. I'm like, it seems abstract. What is that instruction? And is the bot actually going to perform on that? So again, this takes a lot of iteration. No one has all the answers. Well, I feel like I've collected a lot broader set of topics in that diagram that I've got because it covers all these and more. But again, this is a technique. And did I already do um, the QR code on this site? I don't think I did.
On this one, the first one you did.
This the first one I did, and the second one I did. So if somebody wants to pause real quick at the QR code, there it is. All right, so let's go to the scamper technique.
And Adam, just one last thing, if you could just
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back there to the guide technique. This idea that you have to provide all the inputs. When you've got an example website, an example document, or something that you really like, um, as a template and or a body of knowledge, uh, being able to put that in there without having to spell it all out is just so powerful, and it gets people so far down the road, and it gives you something to react to. So you do not have to try to create all of this yourself right from the get-go.
Yep. And the way I kind of look at this is, in some ways, the small language model, yes, it can be existing content. And that right there, just doing that, just setting it up with this is going to have probably the most profound impact of any of this. So if you're not actually consistently using a core set of documents to to act as kind of the primary filter, the large language model helps with interpretation, and there's all the power and the magic's there. But this stuff actually gets into the vector database as well, and things like that. Let's keep going. Whiteboard prompt design. This one, right? Scamper, substitute, combine, adapt, modify, magnify, put to another use or another purpose, eliminate, reverse, rearrange. Again, this is yet another technique. And so what I'm hopefully showing you is that there is no one single technique. And if you say you're doing generative AI and you haven't actually come up with a structure for all this, you're not really doing generative AI. So again, this one goes, I'm not going to go through all the details, but let me just, give an example. There it is, substitute. So you're exploring whether a part of a process can be replaced with another. All right. So in this case, it's saying, can you substitute a part of your input into a deconstructed series of parts? Can you understand how to substitute those variables, right? And so as you're learning your prompt design, you really need to try all these different techniques to start to have a handle on how to optimize for those things. All right. And then lastly, I'll go to ChatGPT capabilities. And one of the things, this is where I'm going to show you a web page from, but what they basically say is, here's what's important. And again, they don't even list. I went through, you can go search for all these on ChatGPT, press pause, hit them up. You will not find, at least at the time I did it, a perfect set of these things. They say, it's repeatable. You got to look at the output. You got to focus on quality, right? This is the human in the middle stuff, and you got to test. So their whole thing is, what they're saying is, like, if you don't have a human in the middle, you're not going to get output. You're not going to get output you like. And until you go through that, so this is that page, or the page I'm referencing, and until you go through that process and iterate, you're not going to get the bot to perform where you want. But here they've got even more stuff, and to me, it's much clearer than some of the content I've talked about out there. But the details, right? Adopt a persona. Delimiters is very interesting, Tom, because then you get to the point of being able to describe data sets, right? Like a template, like an email template, or distinct parts. So I want to replace this part of the output. And you can also tell it to do certain steps, like do this one, then this one, then this one. Providing examples is key. And then, of course, if you want an output a certain way, you've got to tell it about the output you want. You've got to describe it. And this is the thing I've been promoting, like, provide reference text. You got to do that. It's a small language model. So before I move on from that, Tom, what other thoughts do you have?
I mean, really, when you started this, you talked about using design thinking, or using this to support design thinking, and that's probably a whole show in itself. But if you consider the big two main pillars of design thinking, first, generate alternatives. Okay. Generate those from multiple perspectives, be able to refine and prioritize those again based upon different attributes. And that's one aspect of design thinking, the expansive view. And then there's
Hang on, let me write this. So you've got expand. Let me just draw a little separate here, which is about multiple ideas.
Yes, oftentimes from multiple perspectives. That's why we try to get multiple people in the room.
Ideas and perspectives.
Yes.
And a lot of people can't do that on their own. It's kind of an innate skill or a learned skill. So, okay, so you're getting multiple ideas, and you got to expand them with multiple ideas and perspectives. And what were you going to say next?
And then the other big part of design thinking, the contrasting side of that is the constraining side, which says, all right, now that I've got this wonderful body of potential things, how's it look when I stack it up against certain constraints and objectives, when I vary those a little bit. And so, that helps you go from a list of 30 things down to a ranked list of maybe the top 3 or 5.
Yeah, in classic design thinking, we call that form follows function. The function sets the constraints and the priorities.
Yeah.
And then you design the form around it. All right, what was the next thing you were going to say?
And the hardest thing with all this is just getting enough of the right people. When I say right people who have the different perspectives there to do it, or collaborating in either real time or asynchronously now with some other tools to do this. And it's still a matter of interaction and understanding amongst that group, okay? And the greater that understanding and interaction, usually the better the results. And that's still hard, even with all the tooling that's available. And now look what you have.
Yeah.
You've got something where you can do this instantly.
Yeah.
And it's there. You have the long tail of expert inputs, and you've got an immediate way to constrain and rank these things, which would typically be delegated studies or efforts that you would have people or groups of people do in order to come back with meaningful constraints on them. So you've got something now which you would only do in cases where you had high stakes, and it was a relatively expensive process. Now it's really within the hands of almost anyone, and that's very enabling.
It is. It's incredibly enabling. But again, if we want to go from, and there is, I don't want to undervalue how much can happen in step 1, right? You've been reemphasizing that again and again. But to get from step 1 to step 10, that is a whole different level of understanding. And to kind of conclude these prompt design whiteboards, which I think we've done a little bit of demo, but I think we're gonna start to shut this show down because we're at an hour. But to get to that kind of level, you can't be a designer without understanding the materials that you have to design with. You just can't. And so if you don't know how to cook, if you don't know what certain ingredients are, and we put a group of 5 people in a kitchen and none of them really have done it before, well, that's a lot different than putting 5 chefs in a kitchen. There are probably too many arguments there, but a master of all the ingredients and the taste and stuff can do it. And so again, I just want to bring this up. I really think that until you can explain what each one of these are, you don't fully understand. You still don't fully understand. I mean, this stuff is being done all the time. We talked about role specification and goal actions and context, which can get confused. Some people call it background and execute instructions. So you can start to see, I've collected their stuff, but then there's other things like, well, where do the user interface controls, or what's the difference between 0 shot and 1 shot? right? So all these kind of things are really important. And I think we'll wrap up the show now because we're right at an hour. We're still kind of messing with the format a little bit, but this last wrap up, I want to dedicate to Claude, which is Anthropic, right? And just again, what a talented team of engineers. In fact, Elon Musk, who's entering the world to compete with all these guys, also said, and I don't like quoting him all the time, but he's so easy to quote all the time because he's done so much, is that you can't play in this lower level language model space without $10 billion to invest. You got to figure out how to build on top of it. And then Sam Altman just came out and said, if you're really just building things on GPT-4, yes, thank you, we're running out of time. It's likely we're going to steamroll you with GPT-5. That's what he just said. That came across my desk the other day. But if you really want to get into understanding prompt design, you can also ask the GPT itself is one thing, and it will begin to tell you. And again, it'll use creativity. And then lastly, I will say Claude/Anthropic. Is it Google Studio? I think this was Claude Anthropic. Put out what they call a meta prompt. Yeah, it was Anthropic. So a meta prompt where this is a code tool, right? This is VS Code, but you can begin to see the task instruction example. And this is supposedly optimized for Claude. So if you know how to give Claude all this stuff, you will apparently get a great output. And I saw a guy start to play with this on YouTube, and I was like, all right, this is heavyweight. So again, to kind of sum up this whole, let's keep all those. So to sum up this whole presentation, Tom, and wrap up the show, let me get to the final burger. We're at an hour and 3 minutes, maybe a little bit over. Give me your quick thoughts. Now that we've covered so much, and I'll put it here with the wrap up, and then we'll be done. You wrap it up.
All right. Go to slide 7 and 8. Where each area or each person is doing kind of their own thing. Go to slide 8. The enabler of all those different bots is the small language models, which are unified and agreed on, that have the perspective of each individual area and also the organization overall. Without that, the stuff on the right doesn't happen. And the engineering and the curation of that content is where people's minds need to go and their jobs need to shift to in order to get what you're talking about here. Because it's without that, it's not going to happen very well, and it's not going to happen instantly. But people have to be focused on doing that from the get-go. Otherwise, you're going to automatically diverge into all sorts of different areas and produce terrible customer experiences.
And you're going to become way more productive, and a lot of people will be happy with that, but you're not going to get ultimately there. So with that said, we're going to wrap up, and want to thank everyone. Again, reach out, ask us questions. This has been the Generative Sales and Marketing Show, episode 2, which is focused on chapter 3. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.